The radar signature appeared at 3:47 hours, 30 miles northwest of Nellis Air Force Base. No flight plan, no transponder, no response to radio calls. Just a single contact moving at Mach 1.2 toward restricted airspace, silent as death itself. Master Sergeant Rodriguez leaned forward at his console, the green glow painting worry lines across his weathered face. 23 years of air traffic control, and he'd never seen anything like it. The contact flew with precision that made his skin crawl, too smooth for civilian, too confident for lost. "Sir," he called to the watch commander, his voice cutting through the hum of electronics. "Unknown aircraft, bearing 270, altitude Angels 20. She's not talking." Colonel Hayes materialized behind the console like smoke, coffee cup forgotten in his grip. The hot liquid had gone cold an hour ago, but his attention remained laser-focused on the green blip creeping across the scope. IFF. Negative, nothing but primary return. Hayes studied the track, his jaw tightening. In the post-9/11 world, unidentified aircraft approaching military installations weren't mysteries, they were threats. The protocol was clear, carved in stone by blood and bureaucracy. Scramble the alert birds, two-ship F-35s, vector intercept. Rodriguez's fingers danced across his keyboard with practiced efficiency. Viper 11 and 12, scramble, scramble, scramble. Unknown aircraft, bearing 270, Angels 20, heading 190. Weapons condition amber. The alert klaxon shattered the pre-dawn silence across Nellis, and within minutes, two F-35A Lightning IIs roared skyward, their Pratt & Whitney engines painting twin columns of blue fire against the Nevada darkness. Major Hammer Thompson led the intercept, his wingman Lieutenant Ghost Morrison tucked tight in combat spread formation. But the mysterious aircraft had vanished. Not crashed, not landed, simply gone, as if it had never existed. The radar screens showed empty sky where moments before death had been flying at supersonic speed. Hayes stared at the display, his reflection ghost-like in the green glow. In 40 years of military service, he'd learned to trust his instincts above all else. And right now, every instinct screamed that this was just the beginning. 3 hours later, as dawn painted the Mojave in shades of amber and gold, a weathered F-16 Fighting Falcon touched down on runway 21. No radio call preceded its arrival. No flight plan existed in any computer system. The aircraft taxied to the transient ramp with the confidence of someone coming home after a long deployment, its pilot invisible behind the dark visor of a well-worn helmet. Ground crews approached cautiously, their movements careful and measured. The F-16's paint scheme was wrong, not quite military standard, but too professional for civilian ownership. Battle damage scarred its fuselage like old wounds, and its weapons pylons bore the telltale marks of recent combat use. The canopy cracked open with a soft hiss of pressurized air. Security forces surrounded the aircraft within minutes, their M4 carbines at the ready, but pointed toward the ground, professional threat posture without obvious aggression. Staff Sergeant Williams, the duty NCO, stepped forward as the pilot began shutting down systems with methodical precision. Each switch thrown with the confidence of someone who'd performed these actions thousands of times before. "Ma'am, I need you to keep your hands visible and slowly remove your helmet," Williams called out, his voice carrying across the sudden silence of the flight line. The F-16's engine wound down with a gradually decreasing whine, turbine blades spinning to stillness in the desert air. The pilot's movements were unhurried, almost casual. Gloved hands reached up to release helmet connections with practiced ease. Oxygen mask disconnected first, then communication leads, and finally the helmet itself lifted away to reveal a woman in her mid-40s. Her auburn hair was regulation short but somehow managed to catch the morning light, and her eyes, pale green like winter sage, held a depth that spoke of experiences most people couldn't imagine. Colonel Hayes arrived as the pilot completed her shutdown checklist, his staff car kicking up dust clouds in its wake. He emerged from the vehicle expecting confrontation, perhaps even violence. Instead, he found himself looking at someone who radiated the quiet confidence of a consummate professional. She wore a flight suit without patches, name tags, or unit insignia, anonymous but somehow familiar. "Colonel," she said simply, her voice carrying a slight rasp that suggested years of breathing recycled air at altitude. "I need to speak with General Morrison. It's about Operation Nightfall." Hayes felt the blood drain from his face. Operation Nightfall had been classified above top secret for 8 years. The mission files were buried so deep they might as well have been in another dimension, accessible only to a handful of people in the entire Department of Defense. "I don't know what you're talking about." The woman's smile held no warmth, only the patient expression of someone who'd expected exactly this response. "My call sign was Valkyrie 6, she said quietly. "And according to official records, I died over Syria on March 15, 2017. The security forces shifted nervously, uncertain whether they were dealing with a mental patient or something far more dangerous. Hayes studied the woman's face, searching for signs of deception. Instead, he found something that made his hands tremble: recognition. Not personal recognition, but the institutional memory of someone who'd spent decades in the Air Force community. Stories whispered in classified briefings, legends that officially didn't exist. "Your name," he said carefully. "Captain Zara Quinn," she replied. "Though I suspect you'll find that name has been scrubbed from most databases. Along with my squadron, my aircraft, and the 37 missions we flew in places that don't exist on any map." Hayes reached for his radio, then stopped. Protocol demanded he report this immediately, but something deeper, perhaps wisdom earned through decades of service, urged caution. "The general isn't on base." "Then contact him." Her tone brooked no argument. "Tell him the Valkyrie is home." General Morrison's voice crackled through the secure phone with barely contained shock. "Are you absolutely certain it's her?" Hayes stood in his office, watching through the window as maintenance crews gave the mysterious F-16 a wide berth. The aircraft sat on the ramp like a sleeping predator, its battle scars visible even from 300 yards away. "The physical description matches what little we have in the classified files. Auburn hair, green eyes, approximately 5'7". But sir, that's impossible. The after-action reports were crystal clear. Valkyrie 6 was lost with all hands." "I wrote those reports personally," Morrison said, his voice heavy with old ghosts. "Every word was necessary for operational security, but Hayes, if she's really back—" The line went quiet for several heartbeats. "Keep her isolated. Full security protocols. I'm wheels up in 20 minutes." Quinn sat in the secure holding room with the patience of someone accustomed to waiting. She'd accepted the standard-issue water bottle and MRE without complaint, though Hayes noticed she checked both for tampering with the automatic caution of someone who'd survived in hostile territory. Her movements were economical, precise. Nothing wasted, everything purposeful. "The coffee's terrible here," Hayes said, entering with 2 steaming cups. It was a peace offering disguised as small talk. "I've had worse." She accepted the cup but didn't drink immediately. "Kandahar, 2015. They served something that might have been coffee if you squinted at it sideways and had a very active imagination." Hayes settled into the chair across from her, noting how she'd positioned herself with clear sightlines to both the door and window. Old habits from someone who'd learned that survival often depended on maintaining situational awareness. "You want to tell me how a dead pilot walks back onto my base flying an aircraft that shouldn't exist?" Quinn's laugh held no humor. "That's a long story, Colonel, and parts of it are so classified I'd have to kill you after telling you." She paused, studying his face. "But I suppose you have clearance for some of it. Operation Nightfall wasn't what you think it was." "I think it was a black ops mission in Syria that went sideways," Hayes said carefully. "I think 37 Americans died when someone leaked operational details to the wrong people." Close. Quinn took her first sip of coffee and grimaced appropriately. The mission parameters were correct. Neutralize a high-value target who'd been selling advanced American weapons technology to whoever had enough money. The intelligence was solid, the planning was thorough, and the execution was flawless. Her eyes grew distant. Right up until we discovered the target was expecting us. Hayes leaned forward despite himself. The official files on Nightfall were so heavily redacted they read like abstract poetry. But the woman across from him spoke with the authority of someone who'd been there when the bullets started flying. Someone with very high clearance sold us out, Quinn continued. But they made one mistake. They assumed we'd all die when the trap was sprung. The secure conference room fell silent as General Morrison entered, his uniform bearing the 4 stars that marked him as one of the most powerful men in the United States Air Force. At 62, he still carried himself with the bearing of the fighter pilot he'd once been, though desk assignments had softened the edges that combat had sharpened decades earlier. Quinn rose as he entered, her movement automatic despite years away from formal military protocol. Morrison studied her face with the intensity of someone comparing reality to memory, looking for confirmation of something he'd hoped never to see again. "Captain Quinn," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "General Morrison." She remained at attention until he gestured for her to sit. "Thank you for coming." Morrison took his seat across from her, Hayes positioned to one side like a witness to history being made. The room's secure communication equipment hummed quietly in the background, ensuring their conversation would remain protected from electronic surveillance. "I read your obituary," Morrison said bluntly. "Wrote it myself. You died heroically in service to your country, along with every other member of your squadron. The memorial service was beautiful. Your sister spoke about your childhood dreams of flying." Sarah always was good with words. Quinn's expression softened momentarily. "How is she?" "Remarried, 2 kids. She thinks you died 8 years ago." Morrison's tone carried the weight of command decisions that had reshaped lives. "Everyone thinks you died 8 years ago." Quinn nodded slowly. That was the point. Dead pilots don't testify before congressional committees. Dead pilots don't write tell-all books or give interviews to investigative journalists. Dead pilots keep their mouths shut about operations that never officially happened. "You volunteered for extraction denial," Morrison said carefully. "It wasn't a question. Extraction denial was military speak for agreeing to be declared dead if capture seemed imminent. It was the ultimate black ops safeguard, reserved for missions so sensitive that losing the personnel was preferable to having them compromised." "I volunteered to complete the mission." Quinn's voice hardened. "Even after it became clear someone had sold us out. Even after half my squadron was burning wreckage scattered across 30 miles of Syrian desert." She leaned forward, her pale green eyes locking onto Morrison's. "The question is, General, are you still interested in finding out who that someone was?" Morrison's poker face held for exactly 3 seconds before cracking. "You've been hunting them for 8 years." 8 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Quinn's smile was predatory. "But who's counting?" Hayes felt like he was watching a conversation in a foreign language, catching every third word but missing the deeper meaning. "General, with respect, what exactly are we talking about here?" Morrison was quiet for several long moments, wrestling with classifications and compartmentalization that had governed his career. Finally, he spoke with the careful precision of someone walking through a minefield. "Captain Quinn's squadron was tasked with eliminating an arms dealer named Viktor Kozlov, Russian national, former Spetsnaz, who'd gotten his hands on classified American technology and was auctioning it to the highest bidders." "What kind of technology?" Hayes asked. "The kind that could render our stealth aircraft visible to enemy radar," Quinn said simply. "The kind that could turn our technological advantage into a death sentence for every American pilot in a combat zone." The weight of that revelation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Hayes understood aircraft technology well enough to grasp the implications. If America's stealth capabilities were compromised, it would fundamentally alter the balance of power in every potential conflict zone around the globe. Kozlov had samples, Morrison continued. Physical components from classified programs, technical specifications, even source code for targeting systems. Intelligence suggested he was planning to sell everything to a consortium of buyers including China, Iran, and North Korea. Quinn's jaw tightened at the memory. 6 F-16s, configured for deep penetration strike. We were supposed to hit his compound during a planned meeting with buyers, eliminate the technology, the dealer, and anyone who'd already seen what they shouldn't have seen. Clean, surgical, no loose ends. What went wrong? Hayes asked, though he suspected he already knew. Everything. Quinn's voice carried 8 years of suppressed anger. We penetrated Syrian airspace without incident, navigated to the target area using planned routing, and began our attack run exactly on schedule. Kozlov's compound was right where intelligence said it would be. The security arrangements matched our briefings perfectly, and thermal imaging confirmed multiple vehicles in the target area. She paused, staring at something only she could see. Then the SA-15s lit up. Hayes whistled softly. The SA-15 Gauntlet was a sophisticated Russian surface-to-air missile system, designed specifically to engage low-flying aircraft. In the hands of competent operators, it was deadly to anything flying below 15,000 feet. 4 launchers, Quinn continued, positioned to create overlapping fields of fire around the entire target area. Professional setup, military precision. Someone had told them exactly when and how we were coming. Morrison's face had gone gray. Even 8 years later, the memory of losing an entire squadron in a single engagement was a wound that refused to heal. 5 aircraft went down in the first 60 seconds. Valkyrie 2 through 6, all gone. I was Valkyrie 1, Quinn said quietly. Lead aircraft, first in the stack. The missiles were targeted on the following aircraft, designed to kill the formation while leaving the lead ship intact long enough to. She trailed off, jaw working. Long enough to what? Hayes prompted. Long enough to watch, Morrison finished grimly. Psychological warfare. Make the survivor witness the destruction, then hunt them down for sport. Classic Soviet doctrine. Break the enemy's will by demonstrating the futility of resistance. Quinn's hands had unconsciously clenched into fists. But they made a mistake. They assumed I'd run for the border like any rational pilot would. Instead, I dropped to NOE and went for the target. NOE, nap of the earth flying. Skimming the terrain at altitudes measured in feet rather than hundreds of feet, using the landscape itself as cover from radar and missile systems. It was extraordinarily dangerous flying, requiring split-second reactions and absolute confidence in both aircraft and pilot capabilities. The compound was hardened, Quinn continued, but F-16s carry very persuasive ordnance when properly motivated. I put 2 GBU-31s right through Kozlov's front door, then circled back for a damage assessment. Did you get him? Hayes asked. Quinn's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Kozlov was in pieces small enough to mail in an envelope, but his laptop survived in a hardened case, along with client lists, financial records, and complete documentation of every technology transfer he'd facilitated. Morrison leaned back in his chair, including the source of his information about American classified programs. Including, Quinn said with grim satisfaction, the name of the Pentagon official who'd been selling him everything from radar signatures to mission planning software. The silence in the room stretched like a taut wire. Hayes found himself holding his breath, understanding that he was hearing details of an operation that officially had never happened, involving technology that didn't exist, targeting people who were supposed to be dead. You've been hunting this official for 8 years, Morrison said. It wasn't a question. Hunting, tracking, gathering evidence. Quinn reached into her flight suit and produced a small data storage device. Everything's on here. Financial records, encrypted communications, even video surveillance from arms deals. Enough evidence to put someone away for the rest of their natural life. Morrison stared at the device as if it were a venomous snake. Who is it? Deputy Undersecretary of Defense Patricia Hawthorne, Quinn said quietly. Your former classmate at the Air Force Academy. Your colleague on 3 different joint staff assignments. The woman who recommended you for your current position. The color drained from Morrison's face. Patricia Hawthorne was more than a colleague, she was a friend, someone he'd known for over 30 years. They'd served together, socialized together, and trusted each other with sensitive information on dozens of occasions. That's impossible, Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. She knew the mission parameters before we launched, Quinn continued relentlessly. She knew our routing, our timing, our target identification procedures. She even knew our contingency plans if the primary mission failed. Quinn leaned forward. Most importantly, she knew that Kozlov had a standing offer for advance warning of American operations, $5 million for information leading to the successful engagement of U.S. aircraft. Hayes felt like he was watching a controlled demolition, the careful placement of explosive charges designed to bring down something that had seemed solid and permanent. She sold out an entire squadron for money. Not just money, Quinn said. Hawthorne has a son, Marine Corps captain, deployed to Afghanistan in 2016. He was captured during a patrol that went sideways, held by a Taliban cell that was demanding prisoner exchanges for his release. Morrison's eyes closed. She was trying to save her son. Kozlov had connections with groups across the Middle East. He promised her that providing operational intelligence would generate enough goodwill to secure her son's release. Quinn's voice softened slightly. She probably told herself she was being patriotic, saving one American life by risking a mission that was already dangerous. But she killed 37 people instead, Hayes said. 36, Quinn corrected. I survived, and for 8 years I've been building a case that would stand up in federal court, following money trails, documenting communications, establishing a pattern of behavior that goes back almost a decade. Morrison opened his eyes, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Why now? Why surface after all this time? Quinn's expression hardened. Because 3 days ago, Hawthorne was approached by Chinese intelligence operatives. They're offering her $50 million for complete technical specifications on the F-35 stealth coding technology. She paused. The transfer is scheduled for tomorrow night. The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. The F-35 program represented the future of American air superiority, incorporating technologies that had cost hundreds of billions of dollars to develop. If that information reached Chinese scientists, it would allow them to develop countermeasures that could neutralize America's most advanced fighter aircraft. We have to stop her, Morrison said. We? Quinn's eyebrow arched. General, according to official records, I don't exist. I have no authority, no jurisdiction, and no legal standing to investigate anyone. I'm a ghost with a grudge and a stolen F-16. Morrison was quiet for several moments, processing the situation with the methodical approach of someone who'd spent decades making decisions under pressure. What do you need? Official reinstatement, temporary, classified, minimal paperwork, just enough authority to act on United States soil without being arrested for impersonating a federal officer. Quinn's smile held no warmth. And backup, because Hawthorne isn't working alone anymore. The Pentagon's Secure Communications Center buzzed with activity as Morrison's request moved through classified channels at the speed of national security. 3-star generals didn't ask for emergency personnel reinstatements without excellent reasons, and Morrison's service record had earned him the benefit of considerable doubt among senior leadership. Quinn waited in the Nelly's secure facility, her patience a testament to years spent in situations where impatience could prove fatal. She'd changed from her flight suit into a standard Air Force uniform that Hayes had requisitioned from supply, though she wore no rank insignia or name tags. The uniform fit reasonably well, suggesting her physical condition had remained constant despite 8 years of unauthorized absence. "Tell me about the backup," Hayes said, settling into the chair across from her. Morrison was handling the political aspects of her return from the dead, leaving Hayes to manage the operational details. "Hawthorne has been recruiting," Quinn said simply. "Former military personnel, primarily special operations types who have had difficulty transitioning to civilian life. She offers them good money for simple jobs, surveillance, courier services, technical consultation." "How many?" "At least 12 that I've identified. Could be more." Quinn's expression was grim. "They probably don't know what they're really involved in. Hawthorne's good at compartmentalization. Each person only sees one small piece of the operation." Hayes nodded. Compartmentalization was standard procedure for sensitive operations, ensuring that compromise of one element wouldn't expose the entire network. "What kind of timeline are we working with?" "The Chinese contact is scheduled for tomorrow at 2100 hours. Location is a warehouse complex in Alexandria, Virginia, approximately 8 miles from the Pentagon." Quinn produced a small notebook filled with handwritten observations. "I've been conducting surveillance for the past month. Hawthorne's people have been preparing the site, security sweeps, communication equipment, escape routes." "You've been watching them for a month." Hayes studied her face, looking for signs of fatigue or stress. "Where have you been staying?" Quinn's smile was enigmatic. "Places that don't require registration or identification. The American landscape is full of forgotten spaces if you know how to look for them." Hayes understood. 8 years of living off the grid had taught her to exist in the margins of society, invisible to official scrutiny but capable of observing and planning without detection. It was a skill set more commonly associated with intelligence operatives than military pilots. "What's your plan?" he asked. "Infiltrate the meeting, document the transfer, apprehend Hawthorne and her Chinese contacts with enough evidence to support federal prosecution." Quinn's tone suggested she was discussing something as routine as filing a flight plan. Simple, clean, minimal collateral damage. "And if something goes wrong?" Quinn was quiet for several seconds. "Then I disappear again, this time permanently." Morrison returned with news that explained the tension lines around his eyes. Washington approved the reinstatement. Temporary commission, special operations classification, reporting directly to the Joint Chiefs. But there are conditions. "Such as?" "If this operation fails, if there's any exposure of classified programs, or if civilian casualties result from your actions, you'll be disavowed completely. No benefits, no recognition, no acknowledgement that you ever existed." Morrison's voice carried the weight of someone delivering a death sentence. "They're giving you a chance, but they're also covering their own asses." Quinn nodded calmly. "Understood. What about support?" "Limited. One technical specialist for communications and surveillance. Transport to and from the operational area. Beyond that, you're on your own." "Who's the specialist?" Morrison's expression shifted slightly. "Someone with experience in unconventional operations. Someone who understands the value of discretion." A knock at the door interrupted them. Hayes answered to admit a compact man in his early 30s, wearing civilian clothes but carrying himself with military bearing. His dark hair was cut in a style that suggested recent military service, and his eyes held the alert watchfulness of someone accustomed to dangerous environments. "Captain Quinn," Morrison said, "meet Technical Sergeant Marcus Chen, Combat Controller, recently returned from deployment in the Pacific Theater. Chen stepped forward, offering Quinn a firm handshake. "Ma'am, I've been briefed on the operational parameters. I'm here to provide whatever support you require." Quinn studied him for several seconds, her pilot's eye evaluating his potential under pressure. Experience with surveillance technology. Extensive. Electronic intelligence, communications intercept, real-time tracking systems. Chen's responses were crisp, professional. "I also have advanced training in close-quarters combat and emergency medical procedures." "Good," Quinn turned back to Morrison. "When do we leave?" "Transport is being arranged. You'll fly commercially to Washington, establish surveillance of the target area, and position for interdiction tomorrow evening." Morrison's tone carried finality. "Chen will handle communication with command authority. You'll have real-time support for intelligence analysis and tactical coordination." Quinn nodded, her mind already shifting to operational planning mode. After 8 years of working alone, the prospect of having competent backup was both reassuring and concerning. Trust was a luxury she'd learned to live without. "One more thing," Morrison said quietly. "Your call sign has been reactivated in classified systems. As of this moment, you're officially Valkyrie 1 again." The designation hung in the air like a ghost returning home. Valkyrie 1, the survivor, the hunter, the woman who'd spent 8 years seeking justice for 36 dead comrades. Now, officially, she existed again. "Copy that, General," she said simply. "Valkyrie 1 is back." The flight to Washington was unremarkable. Commercial airline, coach seating, Quinn dressed in civilian clothes that made her look like any other business traveler. Chen sat 3 rows behind her, maintaining operational distance while staying close enough to provide support if needed. To casual observers, they were strangers sharing a common destination. Quinn used the flight time to review intelligence reports on her laptop, the screen angled away from curious eyes. Chen had provided updated surveillance data on Hawthorne's activities, including financial records that painted a disturbing picture of systematic betrayal spanning multiple years. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Hawthorne had been selling classified information in small increments, careful never to provide anything so sensitive that its loss would trigger comprehensive security reviews. A weapons systems performance envelope here, deployment schedules there, technical specifications for equipment that wouldn't be fielded for years. Individually, each transaction seemed minor. Collectively, they represented a devastating compromise of American military capabilities. The most damaging revelation was temporal. Hawthorne had been providing intelligence to hostile nations for almost 12 years, beginning shortly after her son's deployment to Afghanistan. The initial motivation of maternal desperation had evolved into something far more mercenary, driven by the addictive combination of easy money and the thrill of operating outside legal boundaries. "She's gotten careless," Chen said quietly, settling into the seat beside Quinn as the aircraft began its descent into Ronald Reagan International Airport. "The financial transfers are becoming larger, more frequent, like someone who's planning to retire soon." Quinn nodded, studying bank records that showed increasingly bold transactions. $50 million is retirement money. She's planning to disappear after tomorrow night. Where would she go? Someplace without extradition treaties. Someplace where $50 million can buy a new identity and a comfortable lifestyle. Quinn closed the laptop as the flight attendant announced final approach, but she's not going to get the chance. The warehouse complex in Alexandria occupied 12 acres of industrial landscape, surrounded by chain-link fencing and accessed through a single checkpoint staffed by private security. Chen had identified optimal surveillance positions in an abandoned office building 600 yards to the east, providing clear sightlines to the target facility while remaining outside the security perimeter. They established their observation post as afternoon shadows lengthened across the Virginia landscape. Chen's equipment transformed the empty office space into a sophisticated intelligence-gathering center. Thermal imaging cameras, directional microphones, communication intercept capabilities, and real-time data links to military satellites overhead. Target building is Structure 7, Chen reported, adjusting the focus on a high-powered telescope. Single-story, concrete construction, approximately 8,000 square feet. Two entrances, main door facing the parking area, emergency exit on the south side. Quinn studied the building through binoculars, noting defensive positions and escape routes with the automatic assessment of someone trained in tactical planning. Security presence. Light, 2 guards at the main entrance, 1 patrol vehicle circling the perimeter every 30 minutes. Professional setup but not military grade. Chen paused. They're not expecting trouble. They should be, Quinn said grimly. Hawthorne's been careful for 12 years. She's not going to expose herself unless she's confident in her security arrangements. Chen's communication equipment chirped softly. Incoming transmission from Command Authority. Morrison's voice filled the small space, transmitted through encrypted channels that made his words sound slightly distorted. Valkyrie 1, this is Command. Chinese intelligence assets have been confirmed in the operational area. 3 vehicles, estimated 8 to 12 personnel, arrived 2 hours ago. Quinn keyed her microphone. Copy, Command. Any indication of official Chinese government involvement? Negative. These appear to be freelance operatives, possibly deniable assets working for private interests rather than state intelligence. Morrison's pause was telling. That could make them more dangerous. They have fewer constraints on their methods. Chen was monitoring multiple communication frequencies, his equipment automatically scanning for encrypted transmissions. I'm picking up short-burst radio traffic from the target building. Digital encryption, probably military grade. Can you break it? Given time, maybe, but they're using frequency-hopping protocols that suggest sophisticated communication equipment. Chen's expression was grim. Professional-grade stuff, not something you'd expect from a simple intelligence transaction. Quinn felt the familiar tightness in her chest that preceded combat operations. After 8 years of hunting alone, she was hours away from confronting the woman whose betrayal had destroyed her squadron and officially ended her life. The weight of 36 dead comrades demanded justice, but the immediate tactical situation required careful planning. Chen, I need you to maintain overwatch and communication support. If this goes sideways, your priority is documenting everything for subsequent prosecution. Ma'am, with respect, the operational plan calls for joint action. I'm supposed to provide direct support, not just observation. Quinn's smile held no warmth. Sergeant, I've been dead for 8 years. If something happens to me tomorrow night, it'll just make the paperwork easier. She turned back to the telescope. But Hawthorne needs to face justice. That's bigger than any individual. Chen was quiet for several moments. Copy that, ma'am, but for what it's worth, I'd rather bring you both home alive. So would I, Quinn said quietly. So would I. The evening sky over Alexandria had deepened to dark purple when the first Chinese vehicle arrived at precisely 20:45 hours. Chen tracked its approach through thermal imaging, noting the professional driving patterns and defensive positioning that marked the occupants as experienced operatives. 3 personnel in the lead vehicle, he reported quietly. 2 more vehicles maintaining overwatch positions approximately half a mile out. Classic security formation, close protection team with rapid response backup. Quinn watched through night vision equipment as figures emerged from the sedan. 2 men and 1 woman, all wearing business attire that didn't quite conceal the bulk of body armor underneath. Their movements were efficient, economical, professionals who understood that confidence was often the best camouflage. Hawthorne's vehicle just entered the compound, Chen announced. Black SUV, 2 escort vehicles, license plates registered to a consulting firm based in Arlington. Quinn felt her pulse quicken as she recognized the woman emerging from the SUV's passenger seat. Patricia Hawthorne looked older than her official photograph suggested, with gray hair and the slightly stooped posture of someone carrying considerable stress. But her eyes remained alert, scanning the area with the automatic caution of someone who'd spent decades handling classified information. "Showtime," Quinn murmured, checking her equipment one final time. She wore lightweight body armor under civilian clothes, carried a concealed pistol and recording equipment, and had memorized every detail of the building's layout from Chen's surveillance reports. "Valkyrie 1, you are cleared for approach," Morrison's voice said through her earpiece. "All command elements are monitoring. Document everything, but priority is apprehension with minimal exposure." Quinn began moving toward the warehouse complex, using shadows and parked vehicles as concealment. The private security guards were competent but not exceptional, their attention focused outward toward potential external threats rather than internal infiltration. The building's ventilation system provided access through a maintenance shaft that Chen had identified during daylight reconnaissance. Quinn moved through the confined space with careful precision, listening to the voices below as Hawthorne and her Chinese contacts established their meeting protocol. "The technical specifications are complete," Hawthorne's voice carried clearly through the thin metal of the ventilation ductwork. "Stealth coating composition, radar absorption coefficients, manufacturing processes, everything your people requested." "Payment has been transferred to the specified accounts," replied a man with a slight accent that suggested educated English rather than native fluency. $50 million American dollars, as agreed. The funds are immediately available." Quinn positioned her recording equipment to capture both audio and video through a maintenance grate, documenting the exchange with the methodical thoroughness of someone who understood the evidentiary requirements of federal prosecution. "There is one additional matter," the Chinese operative continued. "Our analysis suggests these specifications may be incomplete. We require verification that the information is accurate and current." Hawthorne's laugh was bitter. "You want me to prove the intelligence is genuine. How exactly do you propose I do that?" "Field testing. We need confirmation that countermeasures developed from this information will be effective against operational American aircraft." Quinn felt ice form in her stomach. Field testing meant shooting down American planes using technology developed from stolen information. It meant more dead pilots, more destroyed aircraft, more families receiving folded flags and carefully worded letters about ultimate sacrifice. "That wasn't part of our agreement," Hawthorne said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Consider it a bonus opportunity. An additional $50 million for operational confirmation that your information leads to successful engagement of F-35 aircraft." The silence that followed stretched for several heartbeats. Quinn held her breath, waiting for Hawthorne's response, hopping against hope that some vestige of patriotism or basic humanity would assert itself. "Where and when?" Hawthorne asked quietly. Quinn closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 36 dead comrades pressing down like a physical force. Hawthorne wasn't just selling information anymore. She was actively planning the murder of American pilots for money. "Soon," the Chinese operative replied. "We will contact you when arrangements are complete." Quinn keyed her radio with deliberate precision. "Command, this is Valkyrie 1. I have confirmation of technology transfer and evidence of planned operational testing against American aircraft. Moving to intercept." "Valkyrie 1, maintain observation," Morrison's voice crackled back. "Wait for backup units to arrive." But Quinn was already moving, her 8 years of solitary hunting crystallizing into focused determination. Hawthorne had just agreed to help murder American pilots who were probably sleeping peacefully tonight, unaware that their classified technology was being sold to enemies who would use it to kill them tomorrow. She dropped from the ventilation system into a storage area adjacent to the main meeting space, landing with the silent precision of someone who'd spent years practicing exactly this kind of infiltration. Through the thin wall, she could hear Hawthorne and the Chinese operatives discussing transfer protocols and communication schedules. The storage room door opened onto the main warehouse floor 30 feet from where the meeting was taking place. Quinn moved with careful patience, using stacked equipment and shipping containers as concealment while she positioned herself for optimal tactical advantage. 3 Chinese operatives, 2 of Hawthorne's security personnel and Hawthorne herself, 6 targets, all armed, all experienced enough to represent significant threat if the situation deteriorated into violence. Quinn preferred to avoid gunfire if possible, but she was prepared for whatever developed. "The transfer is complete," Hawthorne announced, handing over a secure data storage device. "Everything you requested, plus additional technical documentation that your scientists should find useful." Quinn stepped from concealment with her weapon drawn but pointed toward the ground, authoritative but not immediately threatening. "Federal agent, everyone remain calm and keep your hands visible." The reaction was instantaneous chaos. Hawthorne spun toward Quinn's voice with shock and recognition warring across her features. The Chinese operatives moved with trained precision, seeking cover while reaching for concealed weapons. Hawthorne's security personnel hesitated, uncertain whether they were witnessing an arrest or an attack. "Patricia Hawthorne," Quinn continued in a voice that carried absolute authority, "you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and violation of the Espionage Act. You have the right to remain silent." "You're dead," Hawthorne whispered, her face gone white with shock. "You died in Syria 8 years ago. I read the casualty reports." "I got better," Quinn replied dryly. "Now tell your people to stand down before this gets complicated." The lead Chinese operative, a compact man in his 40s with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command, stepped forward slightly. "I believe there has been some misunderstanding. We are conducting legitimate business negotiations." "Legitimate business doesn't involve selling classified American technology to foreign nationals," Quinn said, keeping her weapon ready but not directly threatening. "And it definitely doesn't involve planning the murder of American pilots." Chen's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Valkyrie 1, I have movement around the perimeter. Multiple vehicles approaching, looks like backup for the Chinese team." Quinn processed the tactical situation with the speed that had kept her alive through 8 years of unauthorized operations. 6 immediate threats, unknown number of reinforcements approaching, limited cover, and no backup closer than 20 minutes away. The smart play would be to withdraw, call for support, and attempt apprehension under more favorable circumstances. Instead, she thought about 36 dead pilots and 8 years of systematic betrayal. "Chen, how many vehicles?" "4 confirmed, possibly more. Estimate 12 to 16 additional personnel." Chen's voice was tight with tension. "Ma'am, recommend immediate extraction." Quinn's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Negative, we finish this here." She raised her weapon to a more threatening position. "Everyone on the ground, hands behind your heads, now." The Chinese operative's hand moved toward his jacket, and Quinn's training took over. 8 years of surviving alone had honed her reflexes to razor sharpness, and her weapon was trained on center mass before his fingers cleared his clothing. "Don't," she said quietly. "I've had a very long 8 years, and I'm not in a patient mood tonight." "You cannot arrest all of us," the operative said, his accent more pronounced under stress. "Even if you succeed here, there are others who will continue this work." "Maybe," Quinn agreed, "but they'll continue it without Patricia Hawthorne's help, and without the F-35 specifications." She gestured toward the data storage device that had fallen to the floor during the initial confrontation. Chen, I need you to call in immediate backup and prepare for tactical extraction. This situation is about to get interesting. Hawthorne found her voice. Quinn, you don't understand the full situation. These people aren't just buying information, they're part of something much larger. If you interfere with this transfer, you'll put American lives at risk. American lives are already at risk, Quinn replied coldly. You've been selling them out for 12 years. The only question now is whether that ends tonight. The warehouse's main entrance exploded inward as Chinese reinforcements arrived, moving with military precision that suggested extensive combat experience. Quinn dove for cover behind a shipping container as automatic weapons fire erupted across the warehouse floor, bullets sparking off concrete and metal with deadly enthusiasm. Valkyrie 1, this is Chen. I count 16 hostiles, professional-grade equipment, coordinated assault patterns. Recommend immediate withdrawal. Quinn keyed her radio while reloading behind cover. Negative, Chen. If Hawthorne escapes tonight, she disappears forever. Too many people have died for her to walk away now. Ma'am, you're outnumbered 8-1. I've had worse odds, Quinn said grimly, then moved. Quinn's combat experience had been forged in environments where hesitation meant death, and perfect planning was a luxury few could afford. She moved through the warehouse with fluid precision, using the industrial equipment and shipping containers as both concealment and tactical advantage. The Chinese operatives were competent, but they were operating in an unfamiliar environment against an opponent who'd spent 8 years learning to survive against overwhelming odds. Quinn knew exactly how to use their numbers against them, force them to move in formation, limit their fields of fire, and turn their coordination into a liability. Her first target was the operative nearest to Hawthorne, a compact woman who'd been providing close protection during the initial meeting. Quinn approached from an unexpected angle, using reflected surfaces to track movement while remaining invisible to direct observation. The engagement lasted less than 10 seconds. Quinn's training emphasized speed and precision over dramatic confrontation. Disable the threat, secure the objective, move to the next problem. The operative went down cleanly, professionally, with minimal noise that might alert others to Quinn's position. Valkyrie 1, Chinese vehicles are repositioning around the perimeter, Chen reported through her earpiece. They're establishing a containment perimeter. You're going to be cut off from extraction routes. Quinn was already moving toward Hawthorne, who had taken cover behind an overturned table but remained visible from multiple angles. The deputy undersecretary's face showed the strain of someone discovering that betrayal carried consequences she hadn't anticipated. Patricia, Quinn called softly, her voice carrying across the warehouse despite the ongoing gunfire. It's time to go home. I can't, Hawthorne's reply was barely audible. My son, they have my son. If I don't complete this transfer, they'll kill him. Quinn felt something cold settle in her stomach. Your son died in Afghanistan 7 years ago. The casualty reports were in the files Chen pulled. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sounds of the Chinese operatives regrouping for another assault. Hawthorne's face crumpled as the foundation of her justification disintegrated. He was supposed to be released, she whispered. They promised me he'd be released if I provided the information they needed. They lied, Quinn said simply. They've been lying for 12 years. Your son died a hero, and you've been dishonoring his memory ever since. The truth hit Hawthorne like a physical blow. 12 years of treason, hundreds of millions of dollars in stolen technology, dozens of compromised operations, all for a son who'd been dead since the beginning. The Chinese had played her perfectly, using maternal desperation to turn a respected official into a systematic betrayer of her own country. What do I do now? Hawthorne asked, her voice broken. You help me finish this, Quinn said. You help me make sure this technology doesn't leave American soil." Chen's voice crackled through the radio with increasing urgency. "Valkyrie 1, I'm picking up communications indicating additional Chinese assets en route. Military transport aircraft, ETA approximately 30 minutes. This is bigger than we thought." Quinn understood immediately. The Chinese weren't just buying information. They were conducting a major intelligence operation on American soil, using Hawthorne as an entry point for systematic technology theft. The F-35 specifications were just one component of a broader effort to neutralize American military advantages. "Chen, contact Morrison immediately. Tell him we need immediate support. This isn't just about Hawthorne anymore." "Already done, ma'am. F-16s are scrambling from Andrews, should be overhead in 15 minutes." Quinn smiled grimly. F-16s are aircraft, flown by pilots who carried on the traditions she'd helped establish. The irony was perfect. "Hawthorne, where's the primary data storage? Not just the device you handed over, but the complete archive." "Encrypted drives hidden in my vehicle." Hawthorne's voice was steadier now, as if confession had provided some measure of relief. "Everything, 12 years of stolen information, financial records, contact protocols. We need to secure those drives before the Chinese do." "The vehicle is surrounded," Hawthorne said. "My security team won't know whether to protect me or surrender me to federal authorities." Quinn was already moving, her tactical mind processing multiple variables simultaneously. "Call them off. Tell them to withdraw to secondary positions and avoid engagement with federal agents." "And then what?" "Then we wait for the F-16s to arrive and remind these people that stealing American technology on American soil carries serious consequences." The warehouse's acoustics amplified the sound of jet engines overhead, low-altitude passes that shook dust from the rafters, and announced the arrival of serious air power. Quinn keyed her radio to the emergency frequency. "Overhead flight, this is Federal agent on the ground. Authentication code Valkyrie 1. Request immediate close air support for containment of hostile forces." "Valkyrie 1, this is Viper lead. Authenticate with mission command." Morrison's voice cut through the radio traffic with command authority. "Viper lead, this is General Morrison. Valkyrie 1 is authenticated for all support requirements. Chinese military aircraft approaching your area, weapons free on anything not squawking friendly IFF." The tactical situation shifted dramatically as American air power established dominance over the operational area. The Chinese reinforcements that had seemed overwhelming minutes earlier were now trapped on the ground, surrounded by armed federal agents and covered by fighter aircraft with authorization to engage hostile forces. "This is Viper lead to all ground units. Chinese transport aircraft turning away from American airspace. They got the message." Quinn felt the familiar satisfaction of a mission approaching successful completion. After 8 years of hunting alone, she had finally cornered her prey. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant rumble of F-16s maintaining overhead patrol. Chinese operatives emerged from cover with their hands raised, the professional calculation that governed their decision-making process, indicating that continued resistance would be suicidal. Quinn approached Hawthorne with her weapon lowered but ready, the moment carrying 8 years of accumulated anger and the weight of 36 dead comrades. Face to face with the woman whose betrayal had destroyed her life, she felt surprisingly calm. "Patricia Hawthorne," she said formally, "you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit espionage, and violation of the Espionage Act. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Hawthorne nodded slowly, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying an impossible burden for too long. "I want to cooperate fully. I want to provide everything. Names, locations, financial records, communication protocols. All of it. Why? Quinn asked. Because my son died believing in something, Hawthorne said quietly, and I've spent 12 years betraying everything he fought for. Federal agents swarmed the warehouse as Quinn secured the scene, their arrival marking the transition from combat operation to criminal investigation. Chen emerged from his overwatch position, his technical equipment documenting every aspect of the Chinese intelligence operation for subsequent analysis. Complete success, he reported to Morrison over encrypted communication. Primary objective secured, intelligence assets captured, technology transfer prevented. Zero friendly casualties. Morrison's voice carried relief and something approaching pride. Outstanding work, both of you. Federal prosecutors are already preparing charges, and the intelligence community wants immediate debriefing on Chinese operational methods. Quinn watched as Hawthorne was led away in restraints. Her 12-year betrayal finally ended. The woman who'd sold American secrets looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of consequences she'd managed to avoid for too long. Valkyrie 1, Morrison continued. Your temporary commission can be extended if you're interested in permanent reinstatement. The Air Force could use someone with your skill set. Quinn was quiet for several long moments, considering a future she'd never allowed herself to imagine. I'll think about it, sir. Right now, I just want to visit Arlington. Arlington National Cemetery, where 36 pilots were buried under headstones that bore their names, their ranks, and the dates of their sacrifice. Heroes who died believing their mission was compromised by enemy action rather than friendly betrayal. They deserve to know, Quinn said quietly. Know what? That their deaths weren't in vain, that justice caught up eventually. She looked up at the F-16s still circling overhead, their navigation lights blinking against the dark sky. That someone remembered. Chen approached with a small device in his hands, the encrypted data storage that Hawthorne had handed to the Chinese operatives. Ma'am, what do we do with this? Quinn took the device, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to contain technology worth hundreds of billions of dollars, information that could shift the balance of power between nations and determine the outcome of future conflicts. We make sure it never leaves American hands again, she said simply. The warehouse complex gradually emptied as federal agents completed their evidence collection, and Chinese operatives were transported to secure facilities for questioning. Quinn stood alone in the space where her 8-year hunt had finally ended, listening to the distant sound of F-16 engines and thinking about the squadron she'd lost so long ago. Valkyrie 2 through 6, pilots whose names were carved in stone at Arlington, whose families had grieved for heroes rather than victims of betrayal. Their deaths had meaning now, purpose beyond the random tragedy of combat operations gone wrong. Chen, she called as the technical sergeant finished packing his equipment. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, for tonight, for having my back, for believing in the mission. Chen's smile was genuine. Ma'am, it was an honor to serve with Valkyrie 1. The call sign hung in the air between them, no longer the designation of a dead pilot, but the operational name of someone who'd refused to let betrayal go unpunished. Valkyrie 1, survivor, hunter, and finally, victor. Quinn walked toward the exit, her steps echoing in the empty warehouse. Outside, federal vehicles were departing with their prisoners and evidence, while overhead the F-16s continued their protective patrol. The night sky looked different somehow, cleaner, as if a stain had been removed from the darkness. Her radio crackled one final time. Valkyrie 1, this is Viper Lead. Request permission to render honors. Quinn smiled, understanding immediately. Permission granted, Viper Lead. The F-16s formed up in missing man formation, 4 aircraft flying in tight diamond with one position deliberately empty. They passed overhead at low altitude, the sound of their engines a tribute to pilots lost and a promise that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Quinn saluted as they passed, her hand steady against the night sky. After 8 years, Valkyrie 1 was finally home. 3 weeks later, Quinn stood in General Morrison's office at the Pentagon, wearing a fresh Air Force uniform with newly restored rank insignia. The reinstatement ceremony had been private, classified, attended only by senior officers who understood the full scope of what she'd accomplished. The intelligence harvest from Hawthorne's cooperation has been extraordinary, Morrison reported, spreading classified documents across his desk. 12 years of Chinese intelligence operations, compromised programs we didn't even know were compromised, financial networks that span 3 continents. Quinn studied the materials with professional interest. Hawthorne's betrayal had been more extensive than anyone imagined, reaching into programs and technologies that formed the backbone of American military superiority. The damage assessment would take years to complete. What about the Chinese operatives? Extradited to face charges in federal court, their government is claiming they were private contractors operating without official authorization, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Morrison's expression was grim. This was a systematic intelligence operation, not a freelance commercial transaction. And Hawthorne? Life sentence, no possibility of parole. Federal prosecutors are calling it the most significant espionage case since the Cold War. Morrison paused. She asked to speak with you before sentencing. Quinn considered the request. The woman who destroyed her squadron and officially ended her life now wanted absolution or understanding or perhaps just human contact with the person who'd brought her to justice. What did she want to say? That she was sorry, that she knew it wasn't enough, but she wanted you to hear it directly. Morrison's voice softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think her cooperation was genuine. She provided everything, locations, protocols, even intelligence on future Chinese operations. Quinn nodded slowly. Sorry was inadequate for 36 dead pilots and 12 years of systematic betrayal, but it was perhaps the only thing Hawthorne had left to offer. I've made my decision about the reinstatement offer, Quinn said, changing the subject. And I accept with conditions. Morrison raised an eyebrow, such as, I want to work with pilot training programs, specifically training pilots to recognize and survive betrayal scenarios. Quinn's voice carried the authority of someone who'd learned hard lessons through direct experience. If someone like Hawthorne could compromise operations for 12 years without detection, our security protocols need improvement. Agreed, what else? I want to visit my squadron's families, tell them what really happened, how their loved ones died, why it took 8 years to find justice. Quinn's expression was resolute. They deserve the truth. Morrison was quiet for several moments. That's going to require declassifying portions of Operation Nightfall. There will be political complications. General, 36 families have been living with the lie that their heroes died because of intelligence failures. They deserve to know their people died because of treason and that the traitor was punished. I'll make the necessary calls, Morrison said finally. The families will get their briefings. Quinn felt something shift inside her chest, not quite peace, but the beginning of closure. 8 years of hunting had ended with justice served, but the healing would take longer. Some wounds cut too deep for simple resolution. There's one more thing, Morrison said, producing a small box from his desk drawer. Your original rank was captain when you were declared KIA. The promotion board felt some recognition was appropriate for services rendered during your extended absence. Quinn opened the box to find the silver oak leaves of a major's rank insignia, polished to mirror brightness. A promotion 8 years overdue, acknowledgement that her service had continued even when officially she hadn't existed. Major Quinn, Morrison said formally. Welcome back. Thank you, sir. Quinn pinned on the new rank with steady hands. It's good to be home. Chen appeared in the doorway, wearing his own newly cleaned uniform and carrying a thick folder of classified materials. Ma'am, the debriefing schedule is ready for your review. Intelligence community wants comprehensive sessions on Chinese operational methods, technology assessment procedures, and countermeasure development. Quinn accepted the folder, nodding the heavy classification markings that would govern the next several months of her life. The transition from unauthorized ghost to official Air Force officer would require extensive documentation, but it also represented validation of 8 years spent seeking justice. Major, Morrison said as she prepared to leave, your call sign has been permanently retired from active service. Valkyrie 1 will never be assigned to another pilot. Quinn understood the honor being offered. Call signs were normally passed between pilots, operational designations that carried the accumulated reputation of everyone who'd used them. Retiring Valkyrie 1 meant her story would remain unique, unrepeatable. Sir, I'd prefer to keep it active, she said quietly. Why? Because there might be other pilots who need to disappear someday, other situations where someone has to become a ghost to hunt justice. Quinn's smile held hard edges. If that happens, I want them to know the call sign is available. Morrison nodded slowly. Valkyrie 1 remains in active status, assigned to Major Quinn indefinitely. Copy that, sir. Quinn left the Pentagon with her new rank, her restored identity, and the weight of 36 dead comrades finally balanced by justice served. The Virginia sky was clear and blue, crossed by the contrails of aircraft carrying on missions she'd helped make possible. Somewhere overhead, pilots were flying combat air patrols with technology that remained classified, protected by security measures that had been strengthened through hard-learned lessons. They flew in aircraft whose capabilities hadn't been compromised, guided by intelligence networks that had been purged of systematic betrayal. They flew because Valkyrie 1 had refused to let treason go unpunished. 6 months later, Major Quinn stood before a class of Air Force Academy cadets, her uniform bearing the ribbon of the Distinguished Service Medal, alongside decorations for valor that remained classified. The auditorium was full of young faces, future pilots who would inherit the responsibility of defending American airspace with technologies their enemies desperately wanted to steal. Security isn't just about protecting information, she told them, her voice carrying across the silent room. It's about protecting the people who depend on that information to bring them home alive. A cadet raised her hand. Ma'am, how do we identify potential security threats from within our own organizations? Quinn smiled, remembering a similar question she'd asked during her own cadet years, before she'd learned that betrayal could wear a friendly face and carry impressive credentials. You learn to trust your instincts, she said simply. If something feels wrong, if operational details are being compromised consistently, if missions are failing for reasons that don't make tactical sense, you investigate. You ask questions. You refuse to accept easy explanations for patterns that suggest deeper problems. Another cadet spoke up. What if investigating means challenging senior officers or questioning official explanations? Then you remember that your oath is to the Constitution, not to any individual person. Quinn's voice carried the authority of someone who'd paid a heavy price for that principle. Sometimes doing the right thing requires becoming uncomfortable, unpopular, or even officially dead. The cadets laughed at what they assumed was a joke, but Quinn's expression remained serious. Some lessons could only be taught through experience, and she hoped these young officers would never have to learn them the way she had. After the lecture, Quinn walked across the academy grounds toward the chapel, where a memorial wall honored graduates who'd given their lives in service to their country. 36 names had been added to that wall after Operation Nightfall, each one representing a pilot whose family now knew the truth about their sacrifice. She'd visited those families over the past few months, carrying classified briefings that explained how their loved ones had really died. The conversations had been difficult, anger, grief, and relief mixing in proportions that varied with each family. But they'd also been necessary, closure for people who deserved the truth from the beginning. Major Thompson's widow had been the hardest. Hammer had been Quinn's wingman during training, a competent pilot whose death in Syria had been particularly cruel because he'd been scheduled to rotate home the following week. His wife had remarried and was raising their daughter to believe her father had died fighting for something meaningful. He did die fighting for something meaningful, Quinn had told her. He died trying to stop someone from selling our secrets to people who wanted to kill American pilots. He died being a hero. Now, standing before the memorial wall, Quinn traced the engraved names with her finger. Valkyrie 2 through 6, along with the other pilots who'd been lost when Hawthorne's betrayal turned a surgical strike into a coordinated ambush. "Justice served," she said quietly, finally. Chen approached from behind, his footsteps carefully audible to avoid startling someone whose survival instincts remained permanently engaged. "Ma'am, the next briefing is ready for your review." Quinn turned from the memorial, her attention shifting to current responsibilities. The intelligence community had created a new position for her, Special Advisor for Internal Security Threats, a role that involved analyzing patterns of information compromise and developing countermeasures against insider threats. It was work that suited her perfectly, combining her operational experience with her 8-year education in hunting people who betrayed their oaths. The position also carried the authority to investigate anyone, regardless of rank or position, if evidence suggested they were compromising national security. "What's the case?" she asked as they walked toward the briefing facility. "Possible technology transfer involving the F-22 program, financial irregularities involving a senior contractor, communication patterns that suggest unauthorized information sharing." Chen's voice carried the professional detachment of someone who'd learned not to be surprised by human betrayal. "Evidence of foreign contact. Preliminary indications suggest Russian intelligence interest. Nothing definitive yet, but the pattern is familiar." Quinn nodded, her mind already shifting into investigative mode. The work never ended. There would always be people willing to sell their country's secrets for money, ideology, or personal advantage. But now there were also people like her, hunters who understood how betrayal worked and refused to let it go unpunished. "Chen," she said as they entered the secure facility, "remember that pilot training session we discussed, the one about recognizing insider threats?" "Yes, ma'am, scheduled for next month at Nellie's." "Add a section on persistence. Make sure they understand that justice might take 8 years, but it's worth waiting for." Chen smiled. "Copy that, ma'am. Should I mention that dead pilots sometimes come back to life?" "Only if they ask about call signs that are supposed to be retired," Quinn replied. "Some stories are worth telling." The briefing room contained charts, photographs, and financial records that painted another picture of systematic betrayal. Different names, different technologies, different foreign handlers, but the same fundamental corruption that had destroyed her squadron and officially ended her life. Quinn studied the materials with the patience of someone who'd learned that hunting traitors required methodical investigation and careful evidence collection. The work was less dramatic than her confrontation with Hawthorne, but equally important. Somewhere in America tonight, pilots were sleeping peacefully because classified technologies remained classified. They would wake tomorrow and fly missions protected by security measures that had been strengthened through hard experience. They would return home to families who would never know how close their loved ones had come to being betrayed by people they trusted. That was enough. That was worth 8 years of being officially dead. Quinn opened the first file and began reading. Her attention focused on the details that would lead to the next arrest, the next conviction, the next victory for justice over betrayal. Valkyrie 1 was on the hunt again. The F-35 Lightning II rose through 20,000 feet on a crystalline morning over Nevada. Its pilot testing systems that incorporated lessons learned from Operation Nightfall and the subsequent security reviews. Captain Sarah Mitchell flew with the confidence of someone whose aircraft's capabilities remained classified, protected by security measures that had been paid for with blood and 8 years of patient hunting. She had no idea that her survival depended partially on the actions of a pilot who'd officially died before Mitchell had graduated from flight training. The classified technology that kept her invisible to enemy radar remained secret because someone had refused to let betrayal go unpunished. 200 miles away, Major Quinn stood in her office at Nellis Air Force Base, reviewing intelligence reports that suggested another potential security breach. The work was endless. As fast as they caught one traitor, another seemed to emerge from the shadows of classified programs and lucrative defense contracts. But the work was also satisfying in ways that ordinary military service had never provided. Each investigation prevented technology transfers that could cost American lives. Each arrest protected pilots who would never know their names had been on classified target lists. "Ma'am," Chen called from his workstation, "I've got financial irregularities involving the B-21 program, contractor payments to offshore accounts, communication patterns that suggest unauthorized information sharing." Quinn nodded, her attention shifting to the new case. The B-21 Raider represented the future of American strategic bombing capabilities, incorporating stealth technologies that had cost decades to develop. If that information was being sold to foreign nations, it could neutralize America's most advanced military capabilities. "Foreign contact?" she asked. "Preliminary indication suggests Chinese intelligence interest. The financial transfers match patterns we've seen in previous technology theft operations." Quinn felt the familiar tightness in her chest that preceded a hunt. After 8 years of tracking Hawthorne and 6 months of investigating other security breaches, she developed an instinct for betrayal that rarely failed her. "Start surveillance," she ordered. "Full spectrum, financial monitoring, communication intercept, travel pattern analysis. I want to know everything about this contractor's activities for the past 2 years." "Copy that, ma'am." Quinn turned back to her window, watching F-16s practice combat formations against the Nevada sky. Somewhere among those pilots might be another squadron destined for a classified mission, depending on technology that enemies wanted to steal and allies who might betray them for money. Her radio crackled with air traffic control communications as the training exercise continued. Call signs and vector assignments, altitude clearances and fuel status reports, the routine chatter that filled military airspace during peacetime operations. "Valkyrie flight cleared for approach runway 21, the controller announced. Quinn smiled, nodding that someone had adopted her old squadron designation for training purposes. Valkyrie flight, carrying on traditions that had been interrupted by betrayal but never truly ended. Her desk phone rang, displaying the secure communication symbol that indicated classified traffic from Washington. Quinn answered with practiced professionalism. "Major Quinn, this is General Morrison. We've got a situation developing that requires your expertise." "What kind of situation, sir?" "Multiple defense contractors reporting security breaches simultaneously. Financial irregularities, communication compromises, technology transfers, all happening within the past 48 hours. Morrison's voice carried the tension of someone dealing with a crisis that was still developing. Quinn felt ice form in her stomach. Simultaneous breaches suggested coordination, planning, and resources that went beyond individual traders working for personal gain. Foreign intelligence operation. That's our assessment. Chinese, Russian, possibly others working in coordination. They're making a major push to acquire multiple technologies simultaneously, probably hoping we can't respond to everything at once. Sir, request permission to activate emergency response protocols. If this is coordinated, we need to move fast before they complete their operations. Granted, you have full authority to investigate and interdict as necessary. Chen is cleared for field operations, and you can request additional support as needed. Quinn was already moving, her mind shifting into the operational mode that had kept her alive during 8 years of unauthorized hunting. Chen, pack the surveillance equipment. We're going mobile. Ma'am, what's the timeline? Unknown, but probably measured in hours rather than days. If multiple contractors are compromised simultaneously, someone is planning to disappear with everything they've stolen. Chen began loading equipment cases with practiced efficiency, his movements reflecting months of training with Quinn in investigative techniques and tactical operations. The partnership had evolved from awkward cooperation to seamless professional synchronization. Quinn's computer chimed with incoming classified data, financial records, contractor profiles, security clearance information, and preliminary surveillance reports from multiple defense facilities. The scope of the operation was staggering, involving technologies that spanned every branch of the military. Ma'am, Chen called from his workstation, I'm seeing coordinated communication patterns involving contractors from Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and General Dynamics. Someone has been planning this for months. Quinn studied the data streams, looking for patterns that might reveal the operational structure behind the coordinated theft. Multiple contractors, different technologies, but identical methodologies for information transfer and financial compensation. Chen, cross-reference the communication patterns with known foreign intelligence operational signatures. I want to know which country is running this operation. Already in progress, ma'am. Preliminary analysis suggests Chinese intelligence, but the operational security is too good for a standard MSS operation. This might be military intelligence or a new unit we haven't seen before. Quinn's radio crackled with an emergency transmission from Washington. All units, this is command authority. Multiple defense contractors are reporting active security breaches. Federal response teams are deploying immediately. Priority is preventing technology transfer and apprehending hostile intelligence operatives. Copy that command. Valkyrie team is mobile and proceeding to investigate. Quinn grabbed her equipment bag, checking that it contained everything she might need for an extended operation. Surveillance gear, communication equipment, weapons, and the portable computer systems that had become essential tools for tracking electronic evidence. Chen, what's our first target? Raytheon facility in Virginia. They're reporting unauthorized access to classified missile guidance systems, financial irregularities involving senior engineers, and communication intercepts suggesting imminent transfer to foreign contacts. Quinn was already heading for the door. Then that's where we start. As they left Nellie's Air Force Base, Quinn looked up at the clear Nevada sky where training flights continued their practice missions. The pilots up there had no idea that their survival might depend on stopping another systematic betrayal, another coordinated effort to steal the technology that kept them alive in combat. But they would survive, because people like Quinn refused to let betrayal go unpunished. Valkyrie 1 was hunting again. The Raytheon facility in Virginia buzzed with federal activity as Quinn and Chen arrived, their credentials granting immediate access to the secure investigation area that had been established in the main conference room. FBI agents, Air Force security personnel, and technical specialists worked with the focused intensity of professionals dealing with a national security crisis. Major Quinn, called Agent Williams, the FBI lead investigator assigned to coordinate the multi-agency response. "Glad you're here. This situation is escalating faster than we can track it." Quinn studied the displays showing multiple contractor facilities across the country, each one marked with security breach indicators and suspected technology transfer activities. The scope of the operation was unprecedented. Someone was attempting to steal classified information from every major defense contractor simultaneously. "What's the status?" she asked. "Coordinated penetration of contractor security systems, unauthorized access to classified databases, and financial transfers totaling over $200 million in the past 72 hours. Williams indicated a map showing breach locations across 12 states. "Whoever is running this operation has resources and planning capabilities that rival state-level intelligence organizations." Chen was already connecting his portable,